Welcome back to another edition of the Deep Cover Podcast. I'm your host, Omar Zaran. Thank you as always for joining me for another episode of the show. I think right now, the most interesting league in terms of storylines, what the future looks like, and what the present looks like is the WNBA. It is a league that has experienced a surge in popularity recently. It's a league that is in the middle of a CBA negotiation, and it is a league that has a lot of high level star talent that is incredibly fascinating. And I really wanted to kind of touch on all that stuff today with a return guest, Deadria Clarke, who covers the WNBA in a freelance journalism capacity and specifically recently has covered the Washington Mystics. So, first of all, welcome back. How are you today?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing wonderful today.
Yeah, I think of a WNBA topic and I was like, "Man, I need to have somebody who's really connected to it." And you are definitely that. So, let's start right off. I wanna get into the Aces winning a title and another title, I should say, right? It's their 3rd in 4 years. I went into this year, I'm thinking it feels like Minnesota's year, right? And I thought that they would run through the playoffs and win the title, especially in the middle of the year. The Aces seemed a little bit kind of behind the curve, I think we can say. And a lot of people were kind of writing them off, especially earlier in the year. But, they turned it on. And of course, unfortunate injury, a bunch of injuries really for the Lynx in the conference in the playoffs that led to the Mercury getting to the finals and, eventually losing to the Aces, but a lot of focus on Las Vegas. 3 titles in 4 years, in the Becky Hammon era, A'ja Wilson era, and are they kind of knocking on the doorstep of being one of the best teams we've ever seen in WNBA history?
Yeah, they really are. So what's interesting about the Aces to me is it's a group that when Becky first came in, they were already pretty established, right?
Mm,
They had lost to Mercury back in 2022, or not 2022, rather 2021. They had lost to the Mercury in the semifinals. Mercury obviously went on to take on Chicago. Chicago won that year. That was the famous year that Diana Taurasi broke the Sky's locker room door and they brought it to the parade. So Becky inherited the team after that when Bill Lambert had left. And, they had Liz Cambage, they had Rakona Williams, they had Derek Hamby, as well as A'ja Wilson. And they added Chelsea Gray. Ended up winning. Next year, they got back to the finals, right? We could remember Chelsea Gray got injured and Kia Stokes got injured during, I believe it was game 3 of that series against New York. Then they ended up going on game 4, winning in New York, winning their second title. Then it was last year, they got knocked out by New York in the semifinals, mainly, in my opinion, because adjustments weren't made. The bench wasn't utilized as much. At the start of the season, and I'm actually going to be posting this on my socials to show people, at the start of the season, I actually predicted that the Aces would win the championship. Then about halfway through when I noticed that there was a little bit of issues going, I switched my prediction to Minnesota at that point, that Minnesota was going to go further because they were looking better.
mm.
And despite everything that they went through, part of me was like, can't really count this team out. They're gonna go further than people are expecting them to go because Becky had to make the necessary adjustments and the players had to make the adjustments, right? So taking Jewel Lloyd out of the starting lineup, putting her on the bench, inserting Kirsten Bell into the starting lineup was actually a really, really good idea. And it was a really good idea because it allowed Jewel to just play freely coming off the bench. There was no expectation of her to be that third or fourth option in the starting lineup. Um, and when she came off the bench, she was more comfortable. She was more relaxed, in my opinion, at least. And inserting Kirsten Bell in that starting lineup was for height and for the fact that you have someone else that can take away a few fouls. And when Kirsten, who had her own issues and things that she was going through with the loss of her dad, and, some other things that were going on, but when she locked in, She was able to knock down a couple of threes, do what she needed to do. I think, though, um, one of the players that struggled a little bit, but then became very consistent that a lot of people don't really talk about too much is Dana Evans.
Mm.
Dana Evans made a huge impact. Dana Evans made a huge impact in the games against um, Indiana and then in the games against the Mercury. Now, the thing about Dana is Dana's always been a good two guard versus a one guard. And I believe coming off the bench, there was some plays where she was able to run to one, but there was other plays where she was mostly the two, and she was able to knock down her open shots and do what a lot of us are used to Dana Evans coming from Louisville was able to do. Um, and they really struggled at the start of the season, just like any
Mm.
team struggle at the start of the season when you're at new players and new pieces in. Um, and especially at the start of the season, I noticed a lot of the things that cleared them out last season in the semifinals. The lack of defensive efforts, the lack of switching properly, a lot of ball watching. So
Yeah.
that 53-point loss to Minnesota, everyone hates bringing it up, but that was the turning point, right? Because if you're going to be one of the top teams in the league, you shouldn't be losing by 53 points
Right.
to any team, right? Even the blowout to Indiana, I want to say that also was something that changed the trajectory of them. There was a lot of things I noticed in that too that had they made certain changes, this is what the end result was going to be. Now, Minnesota, I really thought it was going to be Minnesota about halfway through. And then, the injury to Dejanay, I think, was huge. And then the injury to Feet was huge. That really took them out. Because at the end of it, had they had someone like Dejanay's presence coming off of the bench, I think the game 2 loss to Phoenix wouldn't have
Yeah.
been a loss. I don't think Phoenix would have been able to come back from that 20-point deficit to beat them. Game 3, I think even with Fee being out, you would have had someone who could step up off of the bench.
Right.
Um, Even in game 4, I think they would have had someone to step off the bench to help them out. Now, with that being said, one of the arguments I see all the time is, well, Minnesota can win without Fee. The Aces can't win without Asia.
Mhm.
But here's the thing about any team. You're supposed to be able to win without your star. It doesn't make them any less of a star,
Right.
but a good coach builds the team that if one player is taken out, it's not going to stop you. You're still going to be able to win games. And while, yes, it is true that the Aces won one game without Asia, Minnesota won more without Fee. In those games without Fee, they struggled. And they struggled badly, which I don't know. I was one of those people that thought, man, this game 4 is going to be decided here. Like they're not forcing a game 5. Because you got a lot of energy towards the first half of the game, then the second half of the game they fizzled out and they got tired.
You know, what you just said about the Lynx kind of being able to win games without Napheesa Collier, it reminds me again, and it's not an episode of my podcast if I will somehow, some way bring up the New York Knicks, but um, it reminds me of Bill Simmons's Ewing theory, which is kind of like you take Patrick Ewing out, it doesn't matter, and that kind of degraded him as a superstar because he was so replaceable. But to your point, it's just like you have a team, you have a roster constructed. Yes, you lose your superstar. That is gonna hurt, right? There's no doubt about it. But you should have enough of a team building confidence that you could have those people. And I'll tell you, when Minnesota acquired Dejanay Carrington, I was like, they're winning the whole thing. You
Yeah.
know, I'm like, that's one of my favorite players. I love watching her play. And I was like, they got her. And I was like, man, how this is already, I felt like the best team in the league. And I was like, and they acquired this person. And I was just like, it's
Mhm.
over. And then like I said, you get the injuries and it just it gets derailed. It opened up an opportunity for Las Vegas, right? And obviously you talk about the series with the Fever. That team was depleted, in terms of their roster. And but I want to talk about Asia for a second.
Yeah.
Are we looking at the best player to ever play in the W? Before you answer, I just want to rattle off some accomplishments. I just wrote them all down just so I have them here. 4-time league MVP, 7-time All Star, 3-time champion now, 2-time scoring champion, 5-time block champion, 3-time defensive player of the year, rookie of the year back in 2018, 5-time all defense, 6-time all NBA, all WNBA, excuse me, 2 times finals MVP. Currently still in her prime, by the way.
Mhm.
21st all time in points scored, 9th all time in blocks, 18th all time in total rebounds. It is very conceivable that when she's done, she is top 5 in all those categories, and who knows how many more titles and MVPs and all that. So I ask you again, are we looking at potentially the greatest player the WNBA has ever seen?
So, Asia has been on my GOAT list since the 2022 championship. She's
Okay.
been on my GOAT list since then. Um, she will be. She will be the greatest player in this league since Diana Taurasi, Sue Bird, Sylvia Fowles. I mean, if you look at the people that played in her position that have been dominated in this league, right? You have Sylvia Fowles, you have Alana Baird, you have Elena Deladon. Those are some of like the really good fours and fives within our league that have been here for a while. So I think, arguably, hands down, yeah, she's going to be number 1 and 2 on that list by the time that she's done. Hands down, she will be. I mean, her competition right now really is in also in their primes, Stewie and Fee, right?
Mhm,
Stewie and Fee are her competition. Now, do I think that her records are going to last very long? No. And it's controversial to say, but the reason I say that is because you have Sarah Strong,
mhm,
who's going to be in this league in about 2, 3 more years. You have Joyce Edwards coming out of South Carolina that's also going to be in this league in a couple more years. And you have the likes of Audie Crooks, who's coming into this league, right? But then you currently have Angel Reese playing right now. And I think Angel is going to take those records sooner or later, but I think Sarah and Joyce also are coming for those records. I think Sarah and Joyce, we're going to be having the same conversation about them in a few years. But Asia has already solidified her place up there with the other legends. Lisa Leslie, how can I forget Lisa Leslie? Come on, right? You have, I think she's going to solidify her position up there as one of the greats, and we're going to continue to talk about her as one of the greats in this league because what she's done hasn't been done before. That 1,000-point season that she hit before the halfway mark of the season was done last year, never been done.
mhm,
James Parker didn't even do that.
right.
Right? Like, so when you're looking at these things and you're looking at all the facets of her game, she's only getting better. And that's the scary part about it.
Yeah, when you look at it and it's like, this is not just an elite scorer, right? This is a top level defender, a top level scorer still, right? And those players don't grow on trees, man. And I think another thing, with records, as things evolve, science evolves, players play longer, recover from injury faster. And it's worth noting WNBA is adding teams, adding games, right? So more opportunity for stat accumulation in that way.
Yes.
So yeah, the records will fall eventually. And I'm just thinking, I was like, man, this is a level of dominance that you just don't see in any sport, right?
Oh,
Just
yeah.
winning title after title after title and dominating statistically and dominating the awards circuit. It's not something you see but once in a generation. And
Yeah.
and it just boggles my mind, just to see the stuff. And a lot of times, you see like a lot of these different categorizations and comparisons between sports, and I was like, yeah, she's on that level, and there's no way around that. But while all this greatness is going on, and we talked at length already about the playoffs and the aces in Asia, the WNBA and its Players Association is going through a collective bargaining agreement negotiation that has turned, I think, putting it mildly, would be calling it toxic. Um, yeah, so there just really is no agreement going on right now. It feels like the two sides are at odds. The players, of course, are wearing the "pay us what you owe us" shirts throughout the playoffs,
Mhm.
and there's been a lot of conversation about that. Of course, the NBA looms large as ownership principles of the WNBA as well. So what, in your view, is the biggest roadblock right now between the league and the Players Association on getting a deal kind of sewn up here in before the start of the next season?
Those 2 things, right? It's, the main thing is respect and the lack of respect that the league has for the players and what the players are doing. That's a huge roadblock, and that will always be a huge roadblock. And the reason why it's a huge roadblock, and I'm gonna talk about this one for a little bit before I move on to my second point,
Okay.
is because when you have a lot of people who are more business minded and they don't necessarily have that human element, or they're not people who have played the sport, or people who have spent time watching the sport and digesting the sport, they don't see the players as humans. They don't see the players as you're putting on a product, and this product is making us money. This product is bringing fans in to make us money. They just think of, I'm paying you to do what you're doing, so you're making me more money. And if you're making me more money, I'm going to continue doing and giving you what I'm giving you to make me more money. But oh, now you want more from me? No, 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 no. You don't get to get more from me because this is my business. This is my revenue. This is my money I'm making. And that lack of respect, I believe, is the number one thing. The fact that Kathy, and this has been quoted by Stewie and NECA, have been on record saying that Kathy says that they don't understand the business aspect of things. A lot of these players, though, people forget, they're not just WNBA players. They're not just athletes. A lot of them have business degrees. A lot of them have very advanced degrees. A lot of them have master's and PhD degrees, right? So they understand what's going on. A lot of them are entrepreneurs too, which a lot of people forget. And I'm not just
Angel, great example of that, right? She's a total brand right now.
well, not even that's not even the aspect that I'm talking about. She actually started off with having a candle making business that
Mhm.
she does, and she sells them on the side. And those proceeds go back to her foundation. Like, she splits it 50-50. Half goes to her foundation, half goes to her. Then you've got people like Jewel Lloyd who owns a Smoothie King, right? You've got people like Alicia Gray who owns a Wingstop. You have Angel McCoughtry who has her own ice cream business. So that's what I'm talking about. A lot of these, Azabri Stevens and her food truck that she runs with her father. A lot of these players have already the business side of things and the business aspects. Angel Reese, that she's the ultimate businesswoman. If we want to talk about brands and all that stuff, she is the ultimate businesswoman. She understands what it takes to have a business running to keep a brand going and all that. So I think respect is a huge thing that's lacking there. Um, then you have the second part, which is revenue sharing. They don't want to give up the bottom line. They don't want their money to be tampered with. And when I say they, I mean the owners of Kathy. A lot of people don't realize this part, but Kathy benefits from the lack of revenue sharing because Kathy's getting money from that media rights deal, right? Kathy is getting money from these brand deals, the extensions, the bringing in new expansion teams. Kathy is getting money from that. The product sales that the WNBA does, just off of the regular W website, Kathy gets a percentage of all that money, which is why revenue sharing is such a big deal. Majority of these teams are owned by NBA owners who already own an NBA team. So I really sat and thought about it, and I'm like, from a business point of view, they're thinking, I'm already splitting 40 to 50% with the men from what my NBA team is bringing in. So I'm losing money that way by splitting with them. Now you want me to split with the women too? Absolutely not. And that's what it is. Whereas these women are saying, hey, listen, you're making money off of my back. You're making money off of my hard work. You're making money off of the fans and the fan bases that I've cultivated. I want some of that money too, which isn't wrong. It's not wrong to ask that, right? And I think those are two of the biggest barriers that we're gonna see is their lack of respect for the players. And this is not to say that every owner doesn't respect the players. There's quite a bit of owners that we've seen that do respect the players, right? Mark Davis respects his players. The size out of New York respect their players. Like we have seen that players are respected by certain franchises. Even Atlanta, right? Renee Montgomery, who used to be a player, obviously she respects her players as an owner. You got Sue Bird, who's a part owner of Seattle. She obviously respects the players because these are a lot of her peers that she's worked with and played with for years. Um, and I think that's what it comes down to is they don't want to budge on their money. They don't want to budge on how much they're making. And Kathy being a representative of those owners shows just how out of touch that a lot of them really are. I just read an ESPN article today that came out where one of the owners said they didn't like what Fee did because that was a private conversation.
Saw
No,
that. Yeah.
Fee did what she needed to do. And why did Fee do what she needed to do? Lack of respect and lack of budging on the revenue sharing. It's not going to break the bank for these owners to say, but make it 40% revenue sharing,
Mhm.
even 30% revenue sharing. It's not going to break the bank for them. Women are only getting 9% right now. And then that's not even a flat 9% total. It's a 9% after. Sorry, my dog is drinking water. That was the 9% after a total number of revenue is reached. And that number, the W refuses to share with the players.
Mhm.
Only the owners and Kathy know that number.
Hmm. You know, the respect thing, I think every league, once it hits a threshold of popularity, deals with this.
Mhm.
Because a lot of the owners say, well, we were, funneling money into all of this while you were building it up. And let's be honest, like, I don't tune into a game because of who owns the team, right? I tune into the game because of the players. I'm not watching a Sky game for any reason other than I love watching Angel Reese play, right?
Really.
That's part of the respect thing. I want to get into the revenue sharing aspect because that's been a big talking point for a lot of people.
Mhm.
And a lot of people say, well, we want a similar revenue sharing model that the NBA enjoys, right?
Mhm.
And people online who are uneducated about what revenue sharing actually means are like, "Oh, you play half the games and you don't have the popularity that the NBA has, blah, 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 blah." And it's just like it's almost like people saying, "Oh, you that the demand now is $50 million a year contracts," when that's not the case, right? So if you could just kinda go into what revenue sharing means
Yes.
and why players want that.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the NBA, the last time they negotiated a collective bargaining agreement, they sat down with the owners and they said, we want a percentage of ticket sales. And by ticket sales, that's season ticket holders. That is single ticket games, multi-game plans that are placed on sale. They want a percentage of that. They also want a percentage of merch sales, right? And that's any merch sale from the franchise. Doesn't matter if it has the players' lifelets on it or not. Because again, as you said, we're coming to see the players. We're not coming to see the owners. Um, that's what they want. That's what they want a percentage of. And I think what a lot of people confuse is profit versus revenue, right?
Right.
They think that, oh, well, the WNBA is not making any profits. So there's no way that they can share this with the money with the players. No, 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 no. It blows people's mind when I say this. There are quite a few teams in the NBA that haven't turned a profit in damn near 2 decades.
Yeah.
But their players are still getting revenue sharing, right? Because they're still bringing revenue in despite not turning a profit. All of these teams are bringing revenue in. I could tell you from my end of being someone who, has bought season tickets before, those season tickets are going up and they're going up by a lot. So if you mean to tell me you're selling, let's just give, for example, 5 packages to people that include 2 tickets each that are 2 grand for those packages, right? So 5 packages, 2 tickets, 2 grand. That's 10K right there that they're bringing in from 5 people. You mean to tell me you multiply that by 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 plus people that you can't share any of that revenue with the players? Come on now. Oops, sorry, buds. That you can't share any of that revenue with players. Like, and that's what they're at. That's what they're simply asking for. is a percentage of that. A percent a percentage of what is being paid out to the owners. That money doesn't touch their salaries. That money is not where their salaries come from, which a lot of people confuse. In the W, their salaries simply come from the media rights deal that's negotiated. Now, that media rights deal, you want to know who really negotiates that? Adam Silver and the NBA. They are the ones that negotiate. And the W just gets a certain percentage. I'm sorry. Go up. You're okay. Sorry, he's a little. Um, and they get a certain percentage of that. So that's what people get confused a lot of times is these players are not getting paid out of the ticket sales. The NBA players, yes, that's the revenue sharing that they're getting is from these ticket sales, concessions, merch, all of that. Um, so yeah, I don't think it's not usable because you're bringing in money. I mean, the Golden State Valkyries were just listed as bringing in the highest revenue out of both NBA and WNBA teams within like the last year. So you mean to tell me that you would have a brand new expansion team that sold out every single home game, that sold out their season tickets, that had fans coming in game after game after game. You had fans flying from other cities, countries to come see them. They're paying money, they're buying jerseys, they're buying merch, they're buying all this stuff. But those 12 women on the roster can't get a percentage of that?
Right. Yeah, that's the real issue here is, like, there's this talking point for some reason. There's like, "Well, no one, wants to do this WNBA stuff. It's not profitable." The evidence contradicts that completely because why are ownership groups lining up to buy WNBA franchises?
Exactly.
Like we got Toronto starting next year, Portland's getting a new franchise. There was interest in the Sun being relocated into a new ownership group. So it's just there is massive, massive interest. We saw like season tickets for the Liberty were just like skyrocketing, right? Which makes sense. They're a solid team, big market obviously, as the interest increases, so are the ticket prices. And, it's just like they're trying to almost feels like there's a movement within the league itself to try to underpin that and undervalue that. So to say, hey, we're still a growing league, easy with the demands. And like the percentage thing is crazy because you said 9%, right?
Mhm.
And it's much closer to being a 50-50 split in the NBA. It's
Mhm.
like that in the NFL. It's just like
Yeah.
the 9% number is crazy, right? And that is, I think, what the players are really trying to drive home. It almost feels like the spin from the league is trying to say, "Oh, they're trying to get all this money. Us, our poor little league." It's like not
Right.
not really a poor little league anymore, right?
Right.
You're a rapidly growing league still, and that takes us to Napheesa Collier's comments, which you have alluded to about Commissioner Cathy Engelbert. And, she kind of talked about the stuff that Kathy had said to her, and the the Caitlin Clark platform thing was wild to me because Caitlin Clark had a massive platform in Iowa before she even was drafted by the Fever, right? So, you know, uh, let's not pretend like she didn't turbocharge your league, Kathy. So,
That.
in terms of interest. And so and a lot of, players, even Caitlyn said, "Yeah, I stand with what Nafisa said,"
Mhm.
because and which is a lot because Caitlin Clark never is controversial in that way, right? It's just like
Yeah.
she always just kinda toes the company line, I feel like. So when she's saying that and other star players are saying that are in agreement with Nafisa Collier, are we at a point now where it's almost like a point of no return with Kathy as the commissioner of this league?
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely are. And to kind of go back to your Caitlin Clark, what she said, she's still towed. She's definitely still towed the company line. You
Caitlyn
know,
standards, right? We're
right,
we're
which
rating on a curve here, but yeah.
she has to, right? She's going to. I don't expect her to come out and make a more definitive statement because that's
Mhm.
just never been her as a person, right? Even through college. But I think Caitlin Clark part is damning, yes. I think what's the more damning part about what he said that Kathy said is when Kathy said that the players of the league should be on their knees thanking her for the media rights deal, the optics of that I haven't heard talked about a lot. right? When you have a white woman, presumably white straight woman, saying that about a league that is 67% black and about 37% queer. Like that hit me harder than what she said about Caitlyn's platform, because obviously we know that's BS, right?
Yeah, right.
Caitlyn, Angel, Paige, all had a following coming. I would even argue coming out of high school, going into college, they all had a following. They were one of the first classes of the NIL, or yeah, one of the first freshman classes, I should say, that was getting NIL deals. So they were already making money prior to the W, and they heightened the W's popularity. They brought more eyes and more people to the W. So the fact that you're saying that the existing players should be happy when they, Asia, Fee, Stewie, I'd even argue Courtney Williams now, right? They're starting to bring more eyes, more representation. Natasha Cloud, bring more eyes, more representation to the league. The W should be thankful for the players, not the other way around. Because if a lot of the big name players decided, you know what, this was my hobby, I'm done, I'm going to pursue other options, the W would be bankrupt. Easily, the W would be bankrupt. Because people come for those players. Being that this is 2 seasons now, that I've been to every single Mystics game, I can tell you that those games are packed out. In both away and home fans, because the people are here for the players. They're here to see their favorite players play. Even when Caitlyn was injured, the Fever games were still packed because people wanted to see the other players on the Fever. And it's remarkable, but it also shows like the level of tone deaf that Cathy has reached to be able to say things like that comfortably. And I'm be honest with you. If it was someone like NECA in the room, she wouldn't have been so loose-lipped with what she said. She's more loose-lipped with Fee, and this I'm gonna touch on another part that, like, a lot of people don't really think about, but Fee being a biracial woman, and being a biracial woman who expresses her Blackness in a different way, women like Cathy feel very comfortable around them.
Mm-hmm.
They feel very, very comfortable around them. The fact that Fee has and I love Alex. I love Alex Bazell. Um, he's a phenomenal trainer. First and foremost, he's a phenomenal businessman, but he's also a white man, right? And that gives Cathy another layer of comfortability to say what she said. And it stinks because if this was anyone else in the room, she wouldn't have been as loose-lipped with what she was saying. And I think that is something that she's taking for granted as well.
Mhm.
She's taking for granted the fact that these players are not players that are just like, all right, whatever you give us, we'll be happy with. They're like, no, we've worked hard. We've worked very, very hard, and you're not protecting us. You're not doing the things that you said that you would do for us. And the flip side of that is Cathy did what she had to do to make sure the league is still going. Back in 2022, 2020, 2021, 2022 were 3 rough years for the league. 2020 was COVID, obviously. They had the bubble. It was a shortened season in Florida with no fans. They didn't make a lot of revenue that year. And they did not make a lot of revenue that year because they didn't have ticket sales to sell.
Right.
They weren't selling concessions. They weren't selling a lot of things. Yeah, fans were buying jerseys. Yes, fans were tuning in, but they lost money that year. 2021, things started opening back up with a little bit more precautions. Not as many fans came. They came, but not as many came. So they weren't making as much revenue that year. 2022, what did Cathy do? She sold off a percentage of the ownership to private minority owners to bring in money to help the league stay afloat. That's great around that time. 2023, you started getting more people coming in, more people buying stuff. You're making a little bit more money. 2024, that class boomed. You have a lot of influx of money that came in. This year, 2025, this class boomed. You have an influx of people coming in, spending more money. We're going into 2026, who has like a lot of star-studded players in that class. 2027, 2028, we're having star-studded players. You can no longer say the players have to be grateful for the W because now the players are the ones that are bringing more eyes, more attention, more revenue to the W.
Yeah, that's the thing. Again, I know WNBA fans don't like when I make comparisons between the NBA and the WNBA, but it reminds me so much of the NBA in the '80s because in the '70s, you had good players, right? You had good Celtics teams, good Knicks teams, right? But, a lot of, Sonics and Blazers, had these teams that were interesting, had great players, but the league was still on tape delay, right? And then you get supercharged with Magic and Bird, you had Jordan, and then the league skyrockets in the '90s. This is that moment, right? We have this next generation of players, and they are realizing their worth. You made a point earlier about how smart these players are coming out of college. The WNBA doesn't have a one and done rule. So they're in college for 4 years. They're getting their degrees. They're going to class, So they're not dumb, right? Is the thing. And I'm not trying to suggest that NBA players are dumb, but it's but you're exposed to higher education. You're learning things. You are prepared to use your platform for business,
Yeah.
and you know what you're doing, right? And it just feels like they're undercutting that quite a bit. I
Mhm.
want to talk about Unrivaled though. Obviously, Napheesa Collier and Brianna Stewart, big part of that, right?
Yep.
How does the existence of that league and the proximity of those 2 players to it, how does that affect the negotiations between the WNBAPA and the league itself?
Yeah, so I love Unrivaled. I
Yeah,
think Unrivaled is one of the best things that happened to women's basketball, quite frankly, because it gives them an option to not go overseas.
right.
So Satu Sabali and Gabby Williams both came out and said that part of the negotiations that's stalling is the W does not want to pay them more, give them revenue sharing, but they also don't want them participating in Unrivaled. They don't want them participating in overseas league during off season. They don't want them to do any off season play. You cannot realistically say, I'm not going to pay you more. I'm not going to give you a share of revenue, but those other avenues that you're making money, you can't do those either. Something has to give, right?
Mhm.
And with Unrivaled, they literally got seed money, investment money to start. And with that investment money, they went to the players and said, what do you want? What's going to make your life easier that we can provide and give you? And they were able to do that. So the fact of the matter is the players already know what they need and what they want. It's getting the owners to budge on it and actually do it to make their lives better. When you look at, and I'm going to single them out, and I'm sorry, I'm from Connecticut, grew up being a huge UConn fan, so this is no shade. But when you look at an organization like the Connecticut Sun, which they're struggling, right? Sorry. They're struggling, and they're struggling because they're getting revenue in from the casino, and they're getting revenue in from the team, but at the same time, they don't have a lot to give, right? They don't have a lot to make upgrades and stuff. They need an infusion of money to be able to make those upgrades. So when you have a team that's practicing in rec centers or Atlanta who's sharing a facility, an NBA player's facility, that's used for like CrossFit training and such. When you have things like that, it makes it hard for the players to perform up to the standards that they know that they can. And I think that's the other part is I'm seeing a lot of you want a practice facility, you want all the best stuff. Well, in order for me to do that, I can't give you a portion of the revenue. Some of the revenue has to go towards that.
Mm.
But realistically speaking, a lot of these teams, the way that they get these practice facilities built and up and running is they petition the cities that they're in for money
Yep.
to help them out. Hartford already said, hey, move them from Uncasville to Hartford, and we got you. We'll put money to build you a practice facility. We'll upgrade the XL Center so that you guys can use that and have more of a capacity for fans. you'll be in a more centralized location where it's easier for players to go out and do things, right? Where it's easier to fly in and out. And we can give you a chartered plane at that point to be able to fly back and forth. Because that's another thing. Not every team has charter.
Right.
They're using Delta. Yes, it's a private Delta flight, but they're still using commercial flights to get to and from places. So with Stewie and Fee being on the board, and obviously the biggest thing that comes up with this is, oh, it's a conflict of interest because they're owners and a rival, and they're also on the players board. Well, guess what? Jason Carrington's the owner and a rival. She's on the players board. Steph Dolson's the owner and a rival. She's on the players board. You can't just single Fee and Stewie out by saying that, oh, there's a conflict of interest. You have 36 players within the W that have a conflict of interest right now because they are owners in another league. So I believe that the W is threatened by Unrivaled because they see the demand, they see how much they're paying the players, they see the fact that the players are getting a percentage of the merchant jersey sales from them. They're seeing the fact that the players that Unrivaled has now offered NIL deals to the next generation that's coming up. And they'll be paid while they're in college. And obviously, they'll sign contracts when they get league eligible, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's a huge threat to the W. I found it interesting that Alex and Fee and Stewie offered a percentage of ownership to the W for Unrivaled. And the W put it down because they said that it violates some terms and conditions that they have. So you can't say that two players have a conflict of interest when it's more like 36. And you also can't say that, oh, it violates our terms and conditions when they offered you a piece of that.
You know, let's say, for instance, that the revenue sharing demands are met, and it's maybe closer to the NBA model than what they have now. But the condition is you can't play an unrivaled anymore. Do you think the players will go for that?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Because revenue share is only one part of it, right? If you're not increasing salaries and you're only offering revenue sharing, yeah, cool. That's great, but I can make 500K going over to Russia, right? Or even
Right.
Turkey. I can make 400K, 600K. China, I can make up to $1 million. Why would I give that up if you're not also going to increase my salary?
Let's bring back the NBA's involvement here.
Mhm.
Uh, Something that I see online all the time is how hamstrung this league is by the tie-in of the NBA.
Mhm.
And the NBA was overseeing the WNBA since its inception, right? So coming up on 30 years now. And are we at a point now where it's smart for the two entities to operate independently for the WNBA to secede, so to speak, from the NBA?
Yes. Yes, we reached that point. I would argue that we reached that point probably in 2023.
Okay.
I would argue we definitely reached that point by then. And the thing is, like, the NBA has so much control over so many different aspects of the W. Um, Currently, as it stands, they get 42% of the media rights deal, and they get 42% of revenue that the W is bringing in. That's down from the 50% it used to be. So they dropped 6% less, right?
Right.
Now, I think if the NBA lowered that even more, there would be more money to go around. And revenue sharing wouldn't be as big of a thing, right? Meaning it wouldn't be so hard for them to budge on because of how much money that they're getting. We also have to consider the media rights deal, which is how the women solely get paid, and just a portion of how the men get paid. I believe, if I remember correctly, the NBA negotiated, gosh, it was like 11 bill or 12 bill for that
Mm,
media rights deal. And the W is only getting 2.2 billion of that.
mm.
Now, my math is going to be off here because I don't know the actual full number for the NBA. But the $2.2 billion is only 2% of the media rights deal that the NBA negotiated. 2%
Mhm.
is going to the W. 98% is going to the NBA. But Cathy wants those players to be on their knees thanking her for that 2% that she was able to get them. But realistically, the 2% that Adam Silver was able to get them, and not Cathy.
I mean, when you really think about it, in this world of streaming, like F1 just got a massive deal from Apple TV today. And we're talking about a sports landscape with a bunch of streamers, tech companies that have money to spend, right? And the best way I've written about this a million times, and I firmly believe this is that the tech people, they want you to subscribe to their service. They want you to be sticky. They don't want churn, right? And so how does Netflix make sure you stay on there? They get WWE, they get the NFL, they try to get NBA. They're gonna try and do all of that stuff so you have a reason to stay subscribed.
Yes.
So it's why I think stuff like professional volleyball is gonna be increasing in popularity, and because these networks are gonna try and get that action, right?
Yeah.
So if you're the WNBA, why wouldn't just dividing yourself from the NBA and kind of finding your own media deal with these, it doesn't have to be ESPN or Fox, right?
Right.
It could be CBS. It could be another, like, even like a company like the CW is trying to get better in its sports stuff. They're involved in college football a lot, right? So there's money to be spent here by these networks and these companies, and it. So I agree with you that the NBA has felt like a hampering. And who is it on Threads I follow who talks about WNBA is Magdalena Kana, I think, and she was saying how no other commissioner has to deal with also answering to another commissioner,
Yeah.
because Cathy Engelbert, her boss is Adam Silver, right? So you give her a little bit of understanding that that's a difficult situation, but that makes it even worse for the players, right?
Yeah.
Um, with all this stuff in mind, are we headed towards a lockout now with the way things are going? And is the playing of next season really in jeopardy right
So we're gonna have a season. We're gonna have a season. And the reason I say that we're gonna have a season is that bring back 2020 and how that almost bankrupted the league and the steps that they have to take after. They can't afford to not have a season. And by they, I mean the owners can't afford to not have a season. A lot of the players cannot afford to not have a season, and the organizations can't afford to not have a season, right? They need that revenue, they need that money, and to keep afloat. So, not having a season, I don't think that's going to happen. What I think that we see is an extension. We're going to see an extension because technically they have until January to get the CBA done. And a lot of people don't realize that. January is when free agency officially starts for the W. They have until free agency to get this deal done. In 2019, they got the deal done the night before free agency started.
now?
That is when they got it done. So yes, we will have a season. It's just a question of if they don't get it done by free agency, how much of a season will we get? Are we going to have a full season or are we going to have a shortened season? Because after January, that's when the lockout starts. That's when we're in danger of having a shortened season because they probably will go till February until they can decide, maybe even March, right? And now we're in college hoops
Mm.
prime time when those players are almost getting done and the draft starts in April. I think if they don't get it done by February, the W season probably won't start until June or July because it's going to take more time to, number one, expansion draft for the two teams that are coming in Toronto and Portland. Number two, then you have to push back signing of contracts and getting players to come. And February will be in the middle of Unrivaled, right? And we saw last year a lot of those negotiations and contracts and deals went down during that time. And then you have the college players, which the teams have to start reaching out to them and start talking to them about potentially being drafted to their team. So that's a lot of stuff that hinges upon the CBA being done.
Mm.
So I do think we're gonna have a season. It's just about how long the season's gonna be. It could be like, well, I can't remember the year it was where the NHL and the NBA both had a lockout, so it pushed them to have shortened seasons until they got their CBA done. I think it's gonna be similar to that. We don't want a lockout, and the reason I'm saying is we don't want a lockout is because a lot of fans don't realize until the CBA is fully negotiated, your players that you want to participate are in Unrivaled, the ones that say aren't doing off-season ball, they don't have access to their facilities to practice in. They don't have access to their trainers. They don't have access to their masseuses. They don't have access to the um the meal prep that they get that's able to fuel their training. They have zero access to that during a lockout. So now you're harming the players, right? And you're harming their progress of what quality product they could put on the floor for you. So yes.
Yeah, yeah, players don't want lockouts, right? That's they want to be able to, have a season and stuff, but at the same time, they understand their worth and
Yep.
they know what they bring to the table here, and the owners are just gonna try and, withhold all of that as much as they possibly can.
Right.
As a closing question here, we have seen, you already talked about this past few years, just how the WNBA has exploded in popularity, and it's only getting more popular. It's only going to have more and more recognizable players, especially as the brand of women's college basketball is so strong. And are we having a situation here with the WNBA where they're kind of failing to live to the moment?
Yep.
It feels like the way the commissioner's gone about it and the way the league has marketed itself and just comported itself is just not recognizing what they're really on the precipice of. I mean, would you say that that's accurate?
Yeah. They weren't ready.
Mm,
The league wasn't ready. The league was not prepared for the massive popularity of these players that came in. They weren't prepared for the influx of fans. They weren't prepared for any of that because once again, they're used to being, oh yeah, like we're good. We want more eyes on us. Like great. But they didn't prepare for that. And by they I mean the owners, Kathy. They weren't prepared for this, right? Um, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Kathy's comments last year when she went on the Canadian business. It was the Canadian Business Center or Canadian Business Journal, one of the two,
mhm.
where she talked about the growth in 2024 and she akined it to Magic Bird and how we're going to keep pushing this because we're making money off of it, right? That was one of the worst things that she could have done and one of the best things she could have done. Worse meaning because it shows that you're not focused on the racism aspect of it and how it's actually actively affecting the players in the league. Best because they leaned into an area of that sells.
Yep.
That was able to bring them in more money, more revenue, all that stuff, right? Because you're gonna have the Angel Reese fans going hard for her. You're gonna have the Caitlin Clark fans going hard for her. Um, Me personally, I think it's best practice to stay away from racism altogether. I think, in any league.
Right.
But I found that a lot of these leagues, they don't care. Whatever's making the money is making the money. And they're gonna lean hard into that. So I think that we have reached the point where our commissioner is tone deaf. And I think we have the commissioner of the league is tone deaf. And the league was not prepared for the influx of fans that was coming. And they were not prepared for the demands that a lot of the players would start making because of the influx of fans that are coming, the influx of revenue that's coming. They weren't prepared for all of that.
Yeah, it's just so evident, right, in the way that a lot of this stuff has been handled and the way a lot of these stars are kind of marketed. I remember, like, going into this year, I heard Kathy with an appearance on the Bill Simmons pod, and, her tone was kind of dismissive and, like, she didn't check. I I like Bill's podcast, I like Bill's content. However, on the WNBA, he is woefully undereducated, right? And I'm not saying this, I'm not trying to be like, "Well, I'm locked in every single game," 'cause, I'm not. I'll be honest, but, I know that they extended the season, which he forgot to mention. He was saying player names wrong, and I was just kinda like I was like, "Okay, man." Like, you should have done 5 minutes of research before you had the commissioner of a fucking league on your podcast,
Right, right.
and and she didn't really correct him at all, and I was just like it almost felt like energy. I was like, "Oh, I'm just so happy to be part of the conversation," right?
Yeah,
And the thing is, like, you have reached a point. I am firmly of the belief the WNBA is gonna surpass the MLB in popularity if it
I agree.
hasn't already. It's already surpassed the NHL,
Yeah,
and it's going to be knocking on the doors of these other sports and in the next 10 years because the great thing about women's college basketball, it's why I'm kind of against the one and done coming to the women's game. They build up a national identity and brand in college.
yeah.
I knew who Paige Beckers was because I watched her at UConn. I knew Angel Reese. I know Juju Watkins when she eventually comes into the league because of watching her at USC. And whereas, like, I'm looking at like in the NBA, like VJ Edgecombe. Oh yeah, I saw that one game of Baylor in the one year he was there. It's just like whereas year over year, you get these players who, and there's big brands in women's ball as in college ball as well. So that's a benefit. And so these brands are going to translate into the WNBA because, they've established themselves already in college and the college game is stronger than it's ever been. So yeah, I just feel like the WNBA really didn't grasp what was happening here. And the great leagues that we've had in this country, it's when a commissioner gets it. The NFL got really good because Pete Rozelle got it, right? And we saw the dip in the 90s a little bit when Tagliabue took over, right? And that's every like the NBA was popular. David Stern got it, and that's it. It feels like Kathy doesn't get it, and that's what kills me
No,
about
and I think I think Kathy is currently going through her was in Donald Sterling moment.
it. Oh,
Yes,
Sterling era, yikes.
yep, I
The
think
era nobody wants to be a part of, right?
yep, I think that's what Kathy is currently going through right now, right? He was very tone deaf to everything. They ended up replacing him with Adam Silver, and we saw what Adam Silver was able to do for the NBA after that, right? And I think when it comes to a commissioner, you have to have someone who has pride within the league, right? You have to have someone who is willing to correct people like Bill Simmons, who doesn't know a lot about the league. But you also have to have someone who's personable and someone who like fights for the players and wants to have a relationship with the players. The amount of times that the players have said they didn't answer Kathy's call because they didn't know it was her. None of them have Kathy's phone number saved in
Oh
their
my god.
phone because she doesn't contact them. And that to me spoke a lot. The fact that Kathy called Gabby Williams, left her a voicemail about, "Oh, you're gonna be in the three-point contest and you're gonna be an all-star, blah, blah, blah." And Gabby's like, "Oh, this was meant for Sonia Citron." And then Gabby had to follow Sonia and DM her and say, "Hey, sorry you're finding out this way, but you're an all-star and you're gonna be in the three-point contest." Like,
Jeez.
you don't even have the rookie's phone number to call, like, yeah, that whereas you have people like Candace Parker who said that she has a phenomenal relationship with Adam Silver. You have Sabrina Ionescu who says she has a phenomenal relationship with Adam Silver. Like, it's bad when the W players have a better relationship with the NBA commissioner than the commissioner of their own league.
You would never hear an NBA player tell a story like that, by the way.
Yep.
You would never hear an NFL player say that about Roger Goodell, and that's the key, right? And that's what is so maddening about it for anybody who watches this league because the potential is there, and that there is an opportunity here for this league to really, really skyrocket, and it's already headed in the trajectory, but to really elevate, and it's only getting bigger. There's the 2 franchises adding here. By 2029, you have 3 more on top of that. Who
Yep.
knows how many more by the time we hit 2030 will be kinda set up, so this league needs a leadership that really gets it, and it feels like they don't have it right now.
No.
But, uh thank you so much for joining me. And it's really cool. The last time you were here, I feel like you're talking about the W a lot on Threads and starting to make some content, and now you're a full fledged, credentialed freelance journalist.
Yeah.
Obviously covering the league at large, but primarily focusing on the Mystics. So just which I'm just incredibly proud of people I know being able to make inroads. I know it's difficult, so
Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that, and just let everybody know where they can follow all of your work.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Threads, TikTok, IG. It's at Deadria 101. And I'm currently in the middle of a little hiatus at the moment. But as soon as college basketball gets into full swing, I'll be covering some of the top prospects. And as soon as Unrivaled gets into full swing, I'll be covering Unrivaled completely. And I'm also going to Philly too, so I'll be there.
Awesome. Fantastic. So we'll have Danger's links in the description on the bottom of this episode. Make sure to follow all that content. It is just great stuff. And I love seeing all your posts, particularly on threads. That's where I spend a lot of time. So, but thank you so much for joining me. It's always a blast. And hopefully we'll have some WNBA season to talk about next time I have you on.
I'm gonna keep gossip. So
All right, so thank everybody for tuning in to another edition of the Deep Cover Podcast. I'm your host, Omar Zaran. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Until next time, thank you again for joining me for another edition of the Deep Cover Podcast.